when friendship turns into love. The rain came down in sheets the night everything changed between us. I was standing in the doorway of the old barn, watching Colton walk away through the mud, his shoulders soaked and trembling when he suddenly stopped. He turned back to face me, water streaming down his face, and said the 5 words I'd been both hopping and dreading to hear for the past 3 years. "I can't do this anymore, Mason." His voice cracked on my name, and in that moment I knew our friendship would never be the same. The lightning flashed behind him, illuminating the raw pain in his eyes, and I realized with a sinking heart that I had two choices: let him walk away forever, or finally tell him the truth I'd been hiding since the summer we turned 18. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all really began, back when things were simpler, back when I could still pretend that what I felt for my best friend was nothing more than brotherly love. Back to the beginning of the summer that would change everything. I'd known Colton Hayes since we were both 7 years old, back when his family bought the ranch adjacent to ours in the wide, endless expanse of Montana cattle country. We'd grown up together in the way that only ranch kids can, spending long summer days riding horses across golden fields, swimming in the creek that divided our properties, and staying up late under stars so bright they looked like someone had thrown diamonds across black velvet. He was the kind of friend who knew all my secrets, who could read my moods better than I could myself, who showed up without being asked when things got hard. We'd worked side by side through high school, balancing homework with early morning cattle checks and evening chores. We'd celebrated our high school graduation together just 2 months ago, both of us choosing to stay home and work our family ranches rather than heading off to college like most of our classmates. It made sense. The land was in our blood. Our families had built something here, something worth preserving. And besides, I couldn't imagine a life that didn't include daily contact with Colton. He was as essential to my existence as breathing. What he didn't know, what I'd hidden carefully behind easy grins and casual shoulder punches, was that sometime during our junior year, my feelings for him had shifted into something I didn't have words for. It started small, a flutter in my chest when he laughed, an awareness of exactly where he was in any room, a jealousy that burned hot and uncomfortable when he dated Sarah Mitchell for 3 months. I told myself it was nothing, just the normal possessiveness of best friends who'd never really had to share each other before. But I knew better. Deep down, in the quiet moments before sleep when honesty was unavoidable, I knew exactly what it meant. I was in love with my best friend, and that knowledge terrified me more than anything else in my 20 years of life. This particular summer morning started like any other. I woke at 5:30 to the sound of my alarm, dressed in worn jeans and a faded flannel shirt, and headed out to help my father with the morning feeding. The Montana dawn was cool and painted in shades of pink and gold, the air crisp enough to make my breath visible in small clouds. Our ranch, the Diamond M, sprawled across 3,000 acres of some of the most beautiful country God ever made. Rolling hills, thick stands of pine, meadows that went green and lush in summer and golden in fall. My phone buzzed in my pocket just as I was finishing up with the last of the cattle. A text from Colton, meeting the new ranch hand today. Dad hired someone for the summer. Come over after breakfast. I felt that familiar warmth spread through my chest, the one that came whenever Colton reached out, whenever he assumed I'd be part of his day. I texted back a quick confirmation and headed to the house for breakfast, my mind already on the Hayes Ranch and the hours I'd spend there, working alongside Colton like we'd done 1,000 times before. What I didn't know, couldn't have predicted, was that the new ranch hand would set into motion a series of events that would force everything I'd been hiding into the light. Sometimes the universe has a way of deciding you've waited long enough, that it's time to face the truth whether you're ready or not. This was one of those times. I drove over to the Hayes Ranch around 9, taking the familiar dirt road that connected our properties. The Hayes spread, the Lazy H, was slightly larger than ours, focused more on horse breeding than cattle. Colton's father, Robert Hayes, had a reputation for raising some of the finest quarter horses in the state. The ranch house was a sprawling single-story structure with a wraparound porch, painted white with dark green shutters. The barn and stables sat about 100 yards back, surrounded by a series of paddocks and training rings. I found Colton in the main stable, brushing down Ranger, his favorite horse, a beautiful bay gelding with a white star on his forehead. Colton looked up when I walked in, and the smile that broke across his face made my heart skip in that now familiar way that I'd learned to hide. "Hey, Mace," he called out, using the nickname he'd given me years ago. "Perfect timing. Dad's bringing the new guy over in a minute." I walked over, taking in the sight of him in the morning light that streamed through the stable windows. Colton was tall, maybe 6'2", with the kind of lean, muscular build that came from a lifetime of ranch work. His hair was dark brown, almost black, and perpetually in need of a cut, falling across his forehead in a way that made him brush it back constantly. His eyes were hazel, shifting between green and brown depending on the light, and right now they were bright with excitement. "What do you know about him?" I asked, leaning against the stable door trying to appear casual. "Not much. Dad said he's from Texas, about our age, came highly recommended. Apparently he's worked ranches his whole life and needed a summer job. His name's Blake something." Colton went back to brushing Ranger, his movements practiced and sure. "Should be good to have another set of hands around here. Dad's been talking about expanding the breeding program." I nodded, watching the play of muscles in Colton's forearms as he worked, then mentally kicked myself for starring. This was the constant battle of my life, being close to him while maintaining the careful distance that kept my feelings hidden. It was exhausting and necessary in equal measure. The sound of truck doors slamming announced the arrival of Robert Hayes and the new ranch hand. Colton and I walked out of the stable together, and I got my first look at Blake Cooper. He was tall, probably Colton's height, with sandy blonde hair and bright blue eyes. He had the confident posture of someone comfortable in his own skin, and when he smiled at us, it was warm and genuine. "Boys, this is Blake Cooper," Robert said, gesturing between us. "Blake, this is my son Colton, and this is Mason Drake from the ranch next door. Mason's here so much he's practically family." We all shook hands, exchanging the usual pleasantries. Blake had a firm handshake and an easy laugh. He seemed nice enough, friendly and competent. What I didn't anticipate, what caught me completely off guard, was the way Colton's eyes lit up when Blake started talking about his experience with horses, or the way they fell into an animated conversation about training techniques within minutes of meeting. I stood there, watching them connect over shared knowledge and mutual interests, and felt something cold and sharp twist in my chest. It was ridiculous, I knew. Colton was allowed to make new friends. This possessive jealousy was unfair and immature, but knowing that didn't make it go away. If anything, the rational part of my brain just made me feel worse about the irrational part of my heart. "Mason, you still with us?" Colton's voice broke through my thoughts. He was looking at me with slight concern, his head tilted in that way that meant he'd noticed my distraction. "Yeah, sorry," I said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about the fence repair we need to do today." It was a lie, but a convenient one. Colton accepted it with a nod, and the four of us spent the next hour going over the day's work. Robert assigned Blake to work primarily with Colton on the horse training program, which made sense given Blake's experience. I tried not to read anything into it, tried not to feel like I was being replaced, but the feeling lingered, a low-grade anxiety that hummed beneath my skin. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Colton and Blake become fast friends. They worked together every day, their easy camaraderie evident in the way they moved around each other in the stable. The way their conversations flowed without effort. Blake was good at his job, I had to admit. He had a natural way with horses and a work ethic that matched our own. He fit seamlessly into the rhythm of ranch life. And I hated him for it. Not really, not in any genuine way. Blake hadn't done anything wrong. but I resented the space he occupied in Colton's life, the way he made Colton laugh at jokes I wasn't part of, the way they developed their own shorthand and inside references in just 2 weeks. I felt like I was watching my best friend slip away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it without revealing the real reason it bothered me so much. My behavior changed in subtle ways I couldn't quite control. I found excuses to spend less time at the Hayes Ranch, claiming my father needed more help with our cattle operation. It wasn't entirely untrue. We were always busy in summer, but it wasn't the real reason. The truth was that watching Colton and Blake together hurt too much. Every laugh they shared felt like a small knife wound. Every time Blake clapped Colton on the shoulder or the two of them rode out together to check the far pastures, I felt that sick twist of jealousy and longing. Colton noticed, of course. He always noticed. It was a Thursday afternoon, unseasonably warm even for July, when he showed up at our ranch unannounced. I was in our barn repairing some tack when I heard his truck pull up. My heart did that stupid flutter thing, even as I braced myself for the conversation I knew was coming. He found me in the tack room, his expression serious in a way that was unusual for him. Colton was generally easygoing, quick to smile, slow to anger, but right now he looked troubled, almost hurt. "What's going on with you?" he asked without preamble, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed. The posture was casual, but his eyes were intense, searching my face for answers. "What do you mean?" I replied, not looking up from the bridle I was supposedly fixing. My hands were steady, but my pulse was racing. "Don't do that, Mace. Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about." His voice was gentle but firm. "You've been avoiding me for 2 weeks. Every time I text, you have an excuse. You barely come over anymore. Did I do something? Are you mad at me?" The genuine confusion and concern in his voice made guilt wash over me in waves. This wasn't fair to him. None of this was his fault. He deserved better than my sullen jealousy and silent withdrawal. I set down the bridle and finally looked at him, really looked at him. He was wearing a dark blue t-shirt that brought out the color in his eyes, his hair messy from a day's work, a smudge of dirt on his left cheek. He looked worried and vulnerable, and I hated that I'd put that expression on his face. "You didn't do anything wrong," I said quietly. "I've just been busy, that's all." "That's bullshit and you know it." The curse was mild but emphatic. Colton pushed off from the doorframe and came closer, stopping just a few feet away. "We've been best friends for 13 years, Mason. I know when something's bothering you. Talk to me." The sincerity in his voice, the genuine care, almost broke me. I wanted to tell him everything. The years of hidden feelings, the way my heart raced when he was near, the jealousy that ate at me whenever Blake monopolized his attention. But the words stuck in my throat, trapped behind years of fear and self-preservation. "It's nothing," I insisted, but my voice lacked conviction. "Really, Colt, I'm fine." He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him processing, trying to understand what I wasn't saying. Then his expression shifted to something like hurt realization. "Is this about Blake?" he asked softly. My stomach dropped. What? No, why would? "You've been different ever since he showed up," Colton interrupted, taking another step closer. We were near enough now that I could smell the familiar scent of him, horse and hay, and the mint soap he always used. "I thought maybe you didn't like him or something, but it's more than that, isn't it? You've been pulling away from me." "I'm not," I started, but he cut me off again. "Mason, you're my best friend. You're the most important person in my life. If Blake being around bothers you, I need to know why. Is he saying something to you when I'm not around? Did something happen?" The earnestness in his voice, the automatic defense of our friendship, the way he looked at me like my feelings actually mattered, it was too much. Something in my carefully constructed walls cracked. "He's not doing anything wrong," I said, my voice rougher than intended. "Blake's fine, great, even. I'm sure you two are going to be best friends forever, and that's good. You should have other friends." What the hell does that mean? Colton's confusion was evident. Mason, I don't want Blake to be my best friend. That's your job. That's always been your job. The words hit me square in the chest, and I had to look away before he could see too much in my eyes. People change, Colt. We're not kids anymore. It's natural for things to shift. I don't want things to shift, he said firmly. Not with us, never with us. The conviction in his voice made my throat tight. I wanted to believe him, wanted to let those words comfort me. But the gap between what he meant and what I needed them to mean was too vast. He was talking about friendship, about the bond between brothers. I was drowning in something much deeper and more complicated. Look, I said, trying to find some middle ground that wouldn't end in a lie or a confession. I've just had a lot on my mind lately. It's not about you or Blake. I promise. I'll do better about coming around, okay? It was a weak deflection, and we both knew it. But Colton, bless him, let it go. He studied my face for another moment, clearly wanting to push further, but ultimately choosing to respect my boundaries. Okay, he said finally, though he didn't sound convinced. But Mace, whatever's going on with you, whatever you're dealing with, you can talk to me about anything. You know that, right? I nodded, not trusting my voice. If only he knew how impossible that suggestion was. If only he understood that the one thing I couldn't talk to him about was him, was us, was the way I felt every time he looked at me. He reached out and squeezed my shoulder, the touch brief but warm, and even that simple contact sent electricity through my nerves. Come over this weekend. We'll go riding, just the two of us, like old times. Blake's taking Saturday off to visit some family. Yeah, I agreed, because refusing would have required an explanation I couldn't give. Sounds good. He smiled then, that brilliant smile that had been the center of my universe for longer than I cared to admit, and left. I stood alone in the tack room, listening to his truck drive away, and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. This couldn't continue. Something had to give. I just had no idea what or when or how I'd survive the inevitable fallout. Saturday dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of perfect summer day that made you grateful to be alive. I drove over to the Hayes Ranch mid-morning, finding Colton already saddled up on Ranger with a second horse, Daisy, a sweet-tempered mare I'd ridden dozens of times, ready and waiting. Figured we'd head up to Eagle Point, Colton said as I mounted up. Been too long since we've been up there. Eagle Point was a spot we discovered when we were 12, a rocky outcropping about an hour's ride into the hills that overlooked both our ranches and the valley beyond. It had become our place over the years, somewhere we went to escape, to think, to just be together away from everyone else. We rode in comfortable silence for the first part of the journey, following the familiar trail through pine forests and across meadows dotted with wildflowers. The tension that had been building between us over the past weeks seemed to ease with each mile, the rhythm of the horses and the beauty of the landscape working their usual magic. This is nice, Colton said eventually, breaking the silence. I've missed this, missed us just hanging out without anyone else around. Yeah, I agreed, because it was true. Despite everything, despite the complicated mess of my feelings, being with Colton was still the most natural thing in the world. Me too. Blake's a good guy, Colton continued, and I felt my shoulders tense slightly. But he's not you, Mace, nobody's you. I didn't know what to say to that, so I stayed quiet, letting the words wash over me and trying not to read too much into them. We reached Eagle Point just before noon, dismounting and letting the horses graze while we settled onto our usual spot, a flat section of rock that gave us a perfect view of the valley. The sight never got old, the patchwork of ranches and fields, the ribbon of creek cutting through the landscape, the mountains rising in the distance. We sat side by side, shoulders nearly touching, and for a while neither of us spoke. It was the kind of silence that only comes with deep familiarity, the kind where words aren't necessary because presence is enough. Can I ask you something? Colton said eventually, his voice quiet and careful. Sure, I replied, though a part of me tensed in anticipation. Are you happy? The question caught me off guard. I turned to look at him and found him already watching me, his hazel eyes serious and searching. What kind of question is that? I asked, trying to deflect. An important one, he said simply. You seem different lately, more distant, like there's something weighing on you that you won't talk about. I'm worried about you. The genuine concern in his voice made my chest ache. How was I supposed to answer that? How could I explain that, yes, in some ways I was happy, happy to be here, happy to have him in my life, happy for these stolen moments, but also profoundly unhappy in ways I couldn't articulate without destroying everything between us. I'm fine, I said, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue, just figuring some stuff out. What kind of stuff? I looked away back toward the valley, trying to find words that were true without being the whole truth. Life stuff, future stuff, what I want, who I am. You know, the usual 20-year-old existential crisis. He was quiet for a moment and I could feel his eyes still on me. You can talk to me about that, you know, whatever you're figuring out. I'm your best friend, Mace. That means something. I know, I said softly. It means everything. The words came out more intensely than I'd intended, carrying more weight than a simple agreement should have. Colton shifted beside me, and when I glanced at him, there was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. Surprise, maybe, or confusion, or something else entirely. Sometimes I think you don't realize how much you matter to me, he said quietly. How much our friendship means. You're the constant in my life, Mason. The one person I know I can always count on. Each word was like a small wound, well-intentioned but painful. Because he meant friendship, brotherhood, the bond between two people who'd grown up together. And I meant all of that plus everything he didn't say, everything he probably couldn't imagine. Colt, I started then stopped, unsure of what I'd been about to say. Yeah. I turned to face him fully, and found him closer than I'd expected. Close enough that I could count the faint freckles across his nose, see the various shades of green and brown in his eyes, notice the way his lips were slightly parted as if waiting for me to continue speaking. The moment stretched between us, charged with something I couldn't name. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. Every instinct told me to move back, to put distance between us, to retreat to safety. But I couldn't move. I was frozen, caught in the gravity of his gaze. Mason, he said softly, my name a question. And then something shifted in his expression, a flicker of awareness, of recognition, of something dawning that hadn't been there before. His eyes widened slightly, and I watched in real time as understanding began to form. Panic seized me. I stood up abruptly, nearly stumbling on the uneven rock. We should head back, I said quickly, my voice too loud in the quiet afternoon. Getting late. It's barely past noon, Colton said, confusion clear in his voice. But he stood too, watching me with that same intense, searching look that made me feel exposed and vulnerable. Still, we should go. I was already walking toward the horses, needing distance, needing to escape before I did something irreversible like confess or cry or both. The ride back was tense and awkward, nothing like the peaceful journey up. Colton kept trying to start conversations that I shut down with monosyllabic answers. I could feel his frustration building, could sense his confusion at my sudden withdrawal. But I couldn't help it. I felt like I'd come too close to the edge of something dangerous, and every instinct was screaming at me to retreat. When we got back to the Hayes Ranch, I dismounted quickly, already planning my escape. Mace, wait, Colton said, swinging down from Ranger. What just happened up there? Nothing happened, I said, not meeting his eyes. I just remembered I need to help my dad with something. That's a lie. His voice was flat, almost hurt. You're lying to me. You've been lying to me for weeks now, and I don't understand why. The accusation stung because it was true. I was lying, had been lying, would continue lying because the truth was impossible. I'm not, I started, but he cut me off. Don't. The single word was sharp. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending nothing's going on. Something's changed between us, and you won't tell me what or why. Do you have any idea how that feels? To watch your best friend pull away and not know how to stop it. The pain in his voice nearly broke me. I wanted to reach out, to comfort him, to explain everything. But the fear was stronger, fear of rejection, of losing him completely, of ruining the one relationship that mattered most in my life. I need to go, I said instead, the words coming out rough and strangled. I didn't wait for his response. I got in my truck and drove away, watching in the rearview mirror as Colton stood in the driveway, his posture defeated and confused. The image burned itself into my memory, a reminder of the damage my cowardice was causing. When I got home, I went straight to my room, ignoring my mother's cheerful greeting from the kitchen. I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment from Eagle Point, analyzing every word and look and gesture. There had been something there, I was almost certain. Some moment when the air between us had shifted, when awareness had flickered in Colton's eyes. But awareness of what? That I'd been staring at him too intensely, that my feelings had been written all over my face. Or, and this thought was even more terrifying, had he felt something too? Some echo of what I felt, some parallel tension that had nothing to do with simple friendship. I didn't know, couldn't know, and the not knowing was its own special kind of torture. My phone buzzed with a text, from Colton, of course. What did I do wrong? 3 words that gutted me completely, because he hadn't done anything wrong. This was all me, my feelings, my fear, my inability to be honest. He was just being himself, being the good friend he'd always been, and I was punishing him for it. I stared at the message for a long time, trying to figure out how to respond, how to give him something real without giving him everything. Finally, I typed, "You didn't do anything wrong. I'm sorry. I just need some time to figure some things out." His response came quickly, "Figure what out? I can help if you tell me what's going on." But that was the problem. He couldn't help. This was something I had to navigate alone, even though being alone with these feelings was slowly tearing me apart. Just personal stuff. I promise it's not about you. Another lie, it was all about him, every single thing. The conversation ended there. He didn't push further and I didn't offer more. The silence between us felt heavy, loaded with all the things we weren't saying. The next 2 weeks were miserable. I threw myself into ranch work with an intensity that worried my parents, taking on extra tasks and volunteering for the hardest jobs. Physical exhaustion was the only thing that let me sleep at night, the only thing that kept my mind from spinning in endless circles. Colton texted occasionally, casual messages about daily life that I responded to with equal casualness. On the surface, we were still friends, but underneath, there was a distance that hadn't existed before, a careful politeness that felt nothing like the easy familiarity we'd shared for 13 years. I avoided the Hayes Ranch entirely, claiming work commitments whenever Colton suggested hanging out. It was cowardly, I knew, but it was the only way I could cope. Being around him while maintaining this facade of normalcy was too painful. Better to stay away entirely. Blake texted me once, a friendly message asking if I wanted to join him and Colton for a bonfire that weekend. I made up an excuse and tried not to imagine the two of them together, tried not to picture Colton laughing at Blake's jokes and slowly forgetting that I existed. It was a Saturday night, about 3 weeks after the incident at Eagle Point, when my mother cornered me in the kitchen. "Mason, honey, we need to talk," she said, her voice gentle but firm. I looked up from the sandwich I was making, immediately wary. "About what?" "About whatever's been eating at you for the past month." She crossed her arms, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "You've been different. Withdrawn. You barely eat, You're working yourself into the ground and you haven't mentioned Colton in weeks. That boy has been part of this family since you were 7 years old. So what happened?" "Nothing happened," I said automatically. "We're fine." "Mason Lee Drake, I have been your mother for 20 years. I know when you're lying to me." Her voice was soft but unyielding. "And I know when you're hurting. So please talk to me. Whatever it is, we can work through it together." The kindness in her voice, the genuine offer of support, made something crack in my chest. I set down the sandwich, suddenly not hungry anymore, and leaned against the counter. "What if," I started, then stopped, struggling to find the words. "What if I was different than you expected, than everyone expected?" She was quiet for a moment, studying my face with those perceptive mother's eyes that saw too much. Different how? I couldn't say it, couldn't form the words that would make it real. So I stayed silent, letting her read between the lines, hoping she would understand without me having to spell it out. Understanding dawned slowly in her expression, followed quickly by compassion. She came closer, reaching out to take my hand. "Oh, sweetheart," she said softly, "is this about Colton?" The fact that she'd guessed so quickly shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. I felt my eyes burn with tears I'd been holding back for weeks. "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice breaking. "I've tried to make it go away, tried to just be his friend like I've always been, but I can't anymore, Mom, and I'm so scared of losing him." She pulled me into a hug, and I let myself collapse into it, this strong woman who'd raised me to be honest and kind and true to myself. We stood there in the kitchen, and I felt some of the weight I'd been carrying start to lift. "You won't lose him," she said firmly, pulling back to look at me. "Colton cares about you too much for that. Yes, it might be complicated, and yes, you might need to have a difficult conversation. But hiding who you are, what you feel, that's not sustainable, honey. And it's not fair to either of you." "What if he doesn't feel the same way?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. "What if telling him ruins everything?" "What if not telling him ruins everything instead?" she countered gently. "You're already pulling away from him. He's already noticed something's wrong. How long can you keep this up before the friendship falls apart anyway?" The question hit home because she was right. I'd been so focused on not losing Colton through confession that I hadn't realized I was losing him through avoidance instead. Either way, I was losing him. At least honesty would be on my own terms. "I'm scared," I admitted. "I know, and that's okay. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing it anyway." She squeezed my shoulders. "But Mason, you need to know, no matter what happens with Colton, your father and I love you, exactly as you are. That will never change." The acceptance in her words, the unconditional love, made the tears finally fall. She held me while I cried, releasing weeks of pent-up fear and frustration and longing. When I finally pulled away, I felt lighter somehow, like I'd set down a burden I didn't know I'd been carrying. "Thank you," I said quietly. "You're my son, always." She smiled, brushing a tear from my cheek. "Now I think you have a conversation to have, don't you?" I nodded, knowing she was right but still terrified of what came next. But at least now I wasn't facing it alone. At least now I knew that no matter what happened, I had my parents' support. It was a foundation to build on, a safety net if everything fell apart. I went to bed that night with a strange mix of fear and determination settling in my chest. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow I would talk to Colton. Tomorrow I would tell him the truth, whatever the consequences. I couldn't keep living in this limbo, couldn't keep destroying our friendship through silence and distance. Sleep came fitfully, my mind rehearsing 100 different versions of the conversation, imagining every possible outcome from best to worst. But underneath the anxiety was a thread of relief. Because finally, after months of hiding, I was going to be honest. Finally, I was going to be brave. I just hoped it would be enough. Sunday morning dawned overcast and cool, matching my mood perfectly. I spent the early hours helping with ranch work, trying to burn off nervous energy and postpone the inevitable. But by noon, I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. I texted Colton, "Can we talk? I'll come over this afternoon if you're free." The reply came quickly, "Yeah, I'm free, everything okay. Need to tell you something, see you around too." "Okay, I'll be in the barn." Simple, straightforward. No way to know if he was worried or curious or indifferent. I tried not to read anything into the brief messages and focused instead on preparing myself mentally for what I was about to do. I told my mother I was going over to the Hayes Ranch. She gave me an encouraging smile and a quick hug. "Be honest, be yourself. It'll be okay." I wished I had her confidence. The drive over felt both too long and too short. I parked near the barn, my hands slightly shaky on the steering wheel. Through the open barn doors, I could see Colton mucking out stalls, his back to me. He was wearing a faded gray t-shirt and jeans, his movements efficient and practiced. For a moment, I just watched him, this person who meant everything to me, and tried to memorize this moment before everything changed. He must have heard my truck because he turned, setting aside his pitchfork. His expression was cautious, uncertain, so different from the easy smile he used to greet me with. "Hey," he said as I approached. "Hey," I replied, shoving my hands in my pockets to keep them from shaking. An awkward silence fell between us, so different from our usual comfortable quiet. Finally, Colton broke it. "So what did you want to talk about?" Right to the point. That was Colton, direct and honest, expecting the same from others. It was one of the things I loved about him. "Can we," I gestured vaguely, "maybe sit down somewhere?" He nodded, leading me to the tack room where we'd had our last real conversation weeks ago. We sat on an old bench against the wall, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him but not touching. The familiar smell of leather and saddle soap surrounded us. "Mace, you're worrying me," Colton said quietly. "Just tell me what's going on." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. This was it, the moment of truth. No more hiding, no more lies. "I need to explain why I've been so distant lately," I started, my voice not quite steady. "And I need you to just listen. Let me get through it before you say anything, okay?" He nodded, his hazel eyes fixed on my face with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "You asked me a while back if I was happy," I continued, forcing the words out. "And I lied. I'm not unhappy exactly, but I'm struggling with something I've been struggling with for a while now." I paused, trying to gather courage. Colton stayed silent, waiting, giving me the space I'd asked for. "When Blake showed up, I was jealous," I admitted. "But not for the reason you probably think. It wasn't about him taking up your time or being your friend. It was about—" I had to stop, had to swallow past the lump in my throat. "It was about him being able to be close to you in a way I can't. About watching you connect with someone and wondering if that someone could have been me if things were different." I could see confusion starting to form in Colton's expression, but he stayed quiet, letting me continue. "The truth is, Colt, I've been hiding something from you, from everyone, and it's been eating me alive because the one person I most want to talk to about it is the one person I can't." My voice was shaking now, but I pushed on. "I'm gay, Colton, and I'm in love with you. I have been for years." The words hung in the air between us, impossible to take back. I watched a dozen emotions flicker across Colton's face: shock, confusion, processing. The silence stretched out, each second an eternity. "I know this changes everything," I continued quickly, needing to fill the silence, needing to explain. "And I understand if you don't want to be friends anymore. I've tried to make these feelings go away, tried to just be happy with your friendship. But I can't anymore. I can't keep pretending that what I feel for you is the same as what you feel for me. It's not fair to you, and it's killing me." I finally looked at him, really looked at him, and braced myself for rejection, for disgust, for the loss of the most important relationship in my life. But what I saw in his eyes wasn't any of those things. It was shock, yes, but underneath that was something that looked almost like relief, hope. I couldn't be sure and I didn't dare assume. "Say something," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Please." Colton opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. He seemed to be struggling for words, his usual eloquence completely absent. He started, then stopped. "You're in love with me." I nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging my throat. "For years?" he asked, his voice strange and tight. Another nod. He stood up abruptly and my heart sank. This was it. He was going to walk away, going to end our friendship, going to. But instead of leaving, he just stood there, running both hands through his hair in a gesture of complete overwhelm. "I can't. Mason, I need you to understand something." Here it comes, I thought. The gentle letdown, the "I care about you but not like that" speech. "These past few weeks have been hell," he said, his back still to me. "Watching you pull away, feeling you slip through my fingers, not understanding why. I thought I'd done something wrong. I thought you were outgrowing our friendship, moving on, finding new people." He turned to face me, and I was shocked to see his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "It was killing me, Mace. The thought of losing you was absolutely killing me." "I'm sorry," I said, guilt washing over me. "I never wanted to hurt you." "No, listen," he interrupted, coming back to sit beside me closer this time. "I need you to understand what I'm saying. It wasn't just about losing a friend. It was about losing you specifically. You, Mason Drake, who I've known since we were 7. You, who understands me better than anyone. You, who I think about constantly, who I want to share every good thing with, who I miss the second you leave even if I just saw you 5 minutes ago." My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear my own thoughts over it. "Colton." "I didn't understand it," he continued, the words coming faster now. "Didn't have a framework for it. Blake showed up and you got distant, and I was so confused because I was supposed to be happy about making a new friend, but all I could think about was whether you were jealous and whether that meant you felt even a fraction of what I felt." And he stopped abruptly, seeming to realize what he was saying. "What you felt," I prompted, barely daring to hope. He looked at me then, really looked at me, with an intensity that took my breath away. "That day at Eagle Point when we were sitting so close, I almost— God, Mace, I wanted to kiss you. The thought just came out of nowhere, or maybe not nowhere because I think it had been building for months, but suddenly it was there and I was terrified and confused, and then you jumped up and ran away, and I thought maybe you'd seen it on my face. Maybe you'd known what I was thinking and that's why you left." I couldn't breathe, couldn't process what I was hearing. "You wanted to kiss me." "I want to kiss you right now," he admitted, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. "I've wanted to for weeks, but I didn't understand what it meant, didn't know if you felt anything remotely similar, didn't even know if I was reading the situation right. I've been going crazy, Mace. Absolutely crazy." We were sitting so close now that our knees were touching, that I could see the gold flecks in his hazel eyes, could count his eyelashes if I wanted to. The air between us felt electric, charged with possibility. "So when I said I was in love with you," I started, needing confirmation, needing to be sure I wasn't misunderstanding. "I'm in love with you too," Colton said, and the words were like a key turning in a lock, like everything falling into place. "I think I have been for a long time. I just didn't know it, didn't have words for it. But yeah, Mason, I'm completely, hopelessly in love with you." The confession broke something open inside me, years of longing and fear and hope all crashing together. I felt tears stream down my face, tears of relief and joy and overwhelming emotion. "Can I?" Colton reached up tentatively, brushing a tear from my cheek with his thumb. The touch sent shivers through me. "Can I kiss you, please?" I couldn't speak, could only nod, and then he was leaning in and I was leaning in and our lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home and starting an adventure all at once. It was gentle at first, tentative and sweet, just lips pressed together and breath mingling. But then Colton's hand came up to cup my face, and I grabbed the front of his shirt and the kiss deepened, became something desperate and honest and full of all the things we'd been holding back. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard, both a little stunned. Colton rested his forehead against mine, and I could feel him trembling. "I can't believe this is real," he whispered. "Me neither," I admitted. We sat like that for a long moment, just breathing together, processing the enormity of what had just happened. Everything had changed. Everything was different now. And somehow, miraculously, it was better. "So what happens now?" I asked eventually. Colton pulled back just enough to look at me, a smile spreading across his face, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in weeks. "Now we figure it out together, like we always do." "Together," I repeated, and the word had never sounded so good. The next few weeks existed in a sort of beautiful haze. Colton and I were together now, actually together in a way that still felt surreal and wonderful. We'd agreed to take things slow, to figure out what this new dynamic meant for us, but the relief of not hiding anymore was immense. We told Blake first, since he'd noticed the tension and deserved an explanation. He took it well, actually seemed happy for us, and admitted he'd suspected something was going on. "The way you two look at each other," he said with a grin. "Kind of obvious once you know what to look for." Telling our families was more nerve-wracking. I'd already come out to my parents, but telling them specifically about Colton felt vulnerable in a different way. They were supportive, as my mother had promised, though my father did give Colton a semi-serious talk about treating me right that was both embarrassing and touching. Robert and Susan Hayes were surprised but ultimately accepting. Susan actually hugged us both and said she'd always hoped we'd figure it out, which was simultaneously comforting and mortifying. Robert was more reserved but shook both our hands and told Colton he was happy as long as Colton was happy. The ranch community was small and talk traveled fast. We got some strange looks, some disapproving comments from older folks who'd grown up in a different time. But we also got more support than I'd expected. Neighbors who'd known us all our lives and just wanted us to be happy, friends who rallied around us. Even a few ranch hands who shared their own stories of being different in rural communities. Through it all, we had each other. That was the crucial thing. Whatever challenges we faced together. One evening, about 2 months after that conversation in the tack room, Colton and I rode back up to Eagle Point. It was early September now, the air crisp with the promise of autumn, the aspens just starting to turn gold on the mountainsides. We sat in our usual spot, watching the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Colton's hand was warm in mine, our fingers interlaced in a way that still sent little thrills through me. "Remember the last time we were up here?" he asked, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. "How could I forget? I basically ran away from you." "You were scared," he said simply. "I get that now." "I was terrified," I admitted. "Terrified of losing you, of ruining everything." "And instead we gained everything," Colton said, turning to look at me. The setting sun caught in his eyes, turning them more gold than brown. "Best thing that ever happened to me, Mace. You being brave enough to tell me the truth." "Best thing that ever happened to me was you loving me back," I countered. He smiled, that brilliant smile that was mine now, and leaned in to kiss me. It was soft and sweet and perfect, tasting of happiness and promise. When we pulled apart, I rested my head on his shoulder, looking out at the view that had witnessed so many moments of our friendship and now bore witness to our love. "You know what's crazy?" I said. "What?" "I spent so long thinking that loving you would ruin our friendship, that it was this dangerous thing I had to hide. But it turns out loving you just made our friendship deeper, stronger, more real." "We were always going to end up here," Colton said with certainty. "Maybe not this exact way. Maybe not this exact moment, but us together like this, it was inevitable. I really believe that." I thought about that, about all the years of friendship, all the moments of connection, All the times we'd chosen each other without really understanding why. Maybe he was right. Maybe we'd always been heading toward this, two parallel lines finally meeting at exactly the right point. "I love you," I said, simple and true. "I love you too," he replied. "Always have, I think. Just took me a while to figure out what that meant." We stayed up there until full dark, talking and laughing and stealing kisses, young and in love and grateful for the courage it took to get here. The future stretched out before us, full of uncertainty and challenge, but also promise and possibility. We were ranch kids from Montana, best friends turned lovers, facing a world that wouldn't always understand or accept us. But we had each other, and we had our family's support, and we had a love that had been years in the making. It was more than enough. As we rode back down the trail in the moonlight, Colton started humming some country song I didn't recognize, and I found myself thinking about the journey that had brought us here. All the hiding and fear and longing, all the moments of connection we'd shared without understanding what they meant, all the years of friendship that had built the foundation for something deeper. And I thought about that night in the rain, the night I'd imagined at the start of this story, when Colton had said he couldn't do this anymore and I'd thought I was losing him. But that night hadn't come yet. Maybe it would never come, or maybe when it did, it would mean something entirely different than I'd feared. Because now we were together, now we were honest, now we were choosing each other fully and completely. And that changed everything. The ride back to the Hayes Ranch was peaceful, the night warm and full of cricket song. When we reached the barn and dismounted, Colton pulled me into a hug that I melted into, feeling safe and loved and home. "Stay for dinner?" he asked, his arms still around me. "Always," I replied. And I meant it. Always I would stay. Always I would choose him. Always I would be grateful for the day I'd finally been brave enough to tell the truth. Our story wasn't over. In many ways it was just beginning. But this chapter, the chapter of hiding and fear and unspoken longing, was finally closed. And the next chapter, the one where we faced the world together, hand in hand and heart to heart, was already more beautiful than I'd ever dared to imagine. End note. Thank you so much for watching this emotional journey unfold. If this story touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support means everything and helps me create more stories like this. Drop a comment below and let me know what moment hit you the hardest. And here's the real question everyone wants to know. Should I tell you what happened next? Would you want to see part 2 of Mason and Colton's story? Let me know in the comments and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, keep being brave enough to live your truth. Red.